Elle and Josh, welcome to The Mentor.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I would just want to say first up to everybody, I have to declare my position. I know Josh through his father, Alex. He's a long time friend of Alex, the Abulafia family. But also I'm an investor in ChefPrep. So I have some sort of, what they say in every race there's a horse called self-interest. Well, I'm whipping the shit out of this one. But anyway, we'll talk about ChefPrep in a sec. But before we do, one of the things that intrigues me about people like yourselves is this whole concept or discussion. Do I need to go to university? Oh, wow, I'm at university studying medicine, or I'm studying vet science, or I'm studying law, or I'm studying whatever I'm studying. And shit, all these other people I know are killing it out there, don't need a degree to do what they're doing. So both you law students, both you worked in law firms. You more.
I did, yeah.
I actually never worked at a law firm.
Never worked at
I've got a strong view on this. Actually.
Okay, well, I want to hear because. Well, I want to hear because. I know that Elle worked for a while in the law firm. It's sort of probably helping to fund the business to some extent. I don't know how much that happened, but how important is to do a degree today, or where's the benefit for you?
Maybe you start first, and I'll say my controversial point of view, because I think you got a bit more of a mainstream view on the value of a degree.
Yeah, I really think it varies. So I think obviously if you're going into a professional industry, of like having a degree in that particular, in that particular industry. Obviously if you want to be a lawyer, you have to have a law degree. So that's, kind of part and parcel with that deal. I think for being, a startup founder or an entrepreneur, I don't think it is anywhere near as relevant as, just having that curious state of mind. And I think you can actually teach yourself a lot of different things. And there's a lot of different other avenues for, learning things like product management and, how to, set up systems and processes and things like that. In saying that, for me, doing a law degree, and then also I did a journalism degree as well, I think it really helped frame the way I think about things and the way I think about problems and the way that I have like a disciplined approach to work. And I think that that's, served me really well, not only just as a lawyer, but, working on a startup.
But what about having done the law degree? As a lawyer, they teach you a whole lot of disciplines, or they make you learn a whole lot of disciplines as a lawyer.
Yeah.
How to be efficient with your time and your time sheets, and, be listening to your client, all that sort of stuff, and taking proper notes and being fastidious about note taking, etc. But you had to do a law degree to get to that position.
Yeah, and it's a really controversial and debatable point around what it actually does give you as a tangible skill set. I think with law, I think the way that they structure the way that you think is actually really helpful. So you're looking at case studies, you're going through a process of assessment, you're looking at legislation, you're learning how to interpret things, you're debating with other, people in your degree and things like that. You're learning to, work well in teams. And I think that sort of structure all comes to play, regardless of whatever you do down the track. I definitely think, with law still, that there's a lot of things that you learn outside of university, which, come into practice, like, the note taking, the actual taking of instructions and interviewing clients and, the actual practice management side of things. That is all more when you get out into the market and actually start, working as a lawyer, that you develop those skills.
It helps you to think a certain way in a structured way, but it also helps you learn how to learn.
Yeah, I think so. It gives you that rigor and that discipline. And I think that's a good starting place to then build upon, because obviously that's the way I see that. That's like a soft basis, and then you start to build the skills on that. So I think having, that sort of framework also then helped me like quickly adapt to, different ways of practicing, and, it's just the way that I structure things immediately, and then I can kind of replicate that in, process and systems and documentation.
Now, I got to apologise. I don't. If during the conversation I call Josh Alex, please forgive me, because he looks so much like his father. It's ridiculous, and I remember his father at this age. So, Josh, tell me, what's your view? I can see a different view coming.
So I don't think university is really worth much at all. Like the way that I approached my law degree was I downloaded the database of all the classes that I needed to do, and I found which ones had 0 participation marks and had no final test. So I could do all the work at home and never go into university and still pass.
So you upped the system.
Yeah, exactly. So which taught me a lot, actually, funnily enough. In business is like get to the outcome most efficiently. But I think that for me, I kind of look at university as what it is it's a giant credentialing system, and it's a signaling system to the next level of your life. So if you get a certain credential, that will then allow you to have more access to different jobs in the job market, different things like that. But the tangible skills you get are actually worth far less than the piece of paper that you turn up on. So I think for me, the myth about like it's education, you're learning for learning's sake, like a 4-year business degree doesn't really teach you any business fundamentals in the real world. Like a law degree gives you some basic foundations into law, but you still have to learn and specialize and practice. I think really it's like a credential system that you should do. And I think that the way Australia does it is not very good. My brothers both left home and went, one went to Canberra and one went to Newcastle to do his medical degree. And I think it's much better actually at that age just to leave home and get out of your home. And the fact that most, people who go to UNSW or Sydney still live at home, the actual most valuable life experience, and this is what I did, was just leave home, learn to be an adult, learn to be self-sufficient over that 4 years and go out and make mistakes and just realize it's a credential at the end. It doesn't really necessarily give you a ticket or skills that you can use unless it's a practical degree like medicine, for example.
But does it give you some affirmation to yourself, though, to say that, well, I've completed this, I now know how to complete it. Let's call it a task, but it's a program. I can complete something, therefore I can affirm to myself that I'm someone who can do that. Is there affirmation in it? I
think that other people would feel that, but I just didn't care at all. I remember I got into a big fight with my dad because I was like, I'll just get it mailed, my diploma, because I was like, I don't care. I was already working full time at the time. It didn't really signal or mean anything to me. My career accomplishments meant a lot more at that time. So to me, no, but I can definitely see my classmates. They were all very moved by it because it was a capping of 4 years. But for me, I always knew it was just a step along the journey. But I can definitely see the value to anybody of just being able to do something in a fixed time and complete it is actually valuable, because actually getting stuff done is the most important thing in life.
Totally. And what about the whole, it could be myth, maybe it's not, but for you guys, for your cohort age group, what about that whole concept of networking? So, I mean, I know where you went to school. I don't know where you went to school, Elle, but sometimes some people say to me, oh, well, you should send your kids to a particular type of school because they build great networks. They don't learn any better. I know that for sure because, my kids all went to Cranbrook. They didn't learn any better at Cranbrook than they learn anywhere else in the world. But they did build good networks. They got mates who were successful, one thing and another. Then again, at university, especially in the law faculties, there's good networks. I mean, I don't know, did you meet Elle in law school?
No.
But I mean, I guess networks are important, or are they not? Is it a valuable network?
Yeah, I think that's actually that's something we talk about. It is hugely valuable for the network that you build up. Like I think the value of an MBA is in like you're actually in a cohort of people who are like-minded and ambitious and they want to go through it, and that's extremely valuable in of itself. And I think the more the reality is those more elite institutions, you end up being friends with people, they end up helping each other out, and getting to be a part of that is valuable in of itself. But again, that comes down to the credentialing and the network and not necessarily the value of the education itself. So the product of education is kind of not tied to the network and the credential that you get.
Yeah, but you can't do one without the other, sort of thing.
Correct.
So it's sort of like it's a necessary thing, but not sufficient in that it doesn't give you the outcome. It's necessary, but to get the ultimate outcome you're talking about, you need to do one more step. You need to work the networks. You need to maybe try and specialize in the particular area you're trying to do it at university. It's sort of quite interesting because I know that Josh has told me about it, and I like your views on this too, Elle, because I'd like to get. He's fairly forthright, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I'd like to get Elle's views on this. Some balance.
I'm going to shut him up sometimes.
But this whole concept of networking, Josh told me he's on in a number of groups that sort of are all entrepreneurs, that are all supporting each other, people in your age group, but around your age group anyway.
Yes.
There's a range. And I don't know if this is just a continuation of what you sort of learn at university to network and hang out with people who are like-minded.
It's super important. It's super important. I think for us, it's been hugely beneficial to network and meet a lot of different people in business like ourselves. Because
can you explain how you do it? Like how do you do this?
It's generally just reaching out, reaching out to people, trying to form relationships, becoming part of, specific groups and then gravitating to people. Even just hitting people up on LinkedIn and saying like, look like you're doing something really interesting. I want to find out more about it. I'm working on this. Can we set up a time to have a chat? And then just like literally setting up a time to either have a video conference or a cup of coffee or a drink somewhere and getting to know that person, because you find that we're all going through very similar struggles, even though we might be in completely different industries that we're, operating within. And there's so much to learn from other people. And I think just being open to meeting new people in all different aspects of business and, being open to learning from them and being open to sharing your story is not only cathartic, but it's like hugely beneficial, because the way that they may have dealt with a problem that may be, a conceptually similar problem to what you're facing can, kind of change the game for you in a lot of cases.
But what happens if you don't have his personality? Like he's like, it's honestly like, you could slam the door in his face and he would just keep talking to you and nothing affects him. He doesn't give a shit. I mean, I don't know what your personality is like, but not everybody has that type of that has a very good entrepreneurial personality to have, because you sort of don't get bruised easily. Yeah. And like some people say, oh shit, should I really reach out to the person on LinkedIn? Looks interesting. What about if they say fuck off, or I don't want to talk to you, or don't reply at all? I mean, how do you do all that sort of stuff?
I think it's about attitude overall. So I think the two things is like one, 99% of it is just having a crack. Like you have zero downside risk of like reaching. Like there was someone who I reached out to cold, and he was a CEO and founder of a publicly listed company, right? Just cold reached out. The downside to me was that my ego would get hurt. The upside was potentially couldn't build a good relationship with somebody. So starting off from the position that the downside is 100% fixed and capped, and the upside is unlimited, that's where you got to start. And I think the other thing is there's a difference between networking and climbing. And I think people often associate networking with climbing, which is...
What do you mean?
Yeah, so climbing is like you go to someone trying to get something out of them.
It's very transactional.
Exactly,
right.
Exactly. So I don't want to meet someone who's just trying to get something from me. Instead, I look at people who are going, how can I help them? Right. And then if you start with the attitude of like, I don't want anything from them. I just want to help or meet them or be interested, be curious, and I'm adding value to them, then value can come back to you. And starting from the view of like, how do we grow the pie as much as possible, as opposed to hitting someone up going, I want something from you, or I need this from you, and going, how can I be helpful? And always also going back to the point that everyone kind of started in your position. If you started with nothing, the most successful people in the world started from a basis of nothing. So they understand and they empathize. And as long as you approach it in the correct way, that's super important. But the other side is that there's a privilege extended to getting those benefits of people helping you. So your job is not necessarily to pass it back to the person, but pass it down. So when someone comes to you for help after you've had success, your job is then to help them and facilitate them and add value, because you can't help the person that necessarily helped you as much as they can help you. But passing it forward and having that attitude just means you operate from an attitude of abundance, and it tends to flow back and it keeps coming and building and developing, where you just go, how can I be helpful? And that attitude then means people in all different walks of life want to help work with you, because you're going, how can I be helpful? As opposed to how can I take resource from you?
Is that a mindset? I mean,
Yes.
do you have to structure your mind to think that way, or are you naturally like that?
I mean,
I think you actually have to consciously think about it, because I think a lot of the mindset holding people back around networking is thinking that they don't have anything to give to any of those relationships. And I think changing that mindset where, even if you're going out and approaching someone who's far more experienced than you are, who's got like a, much more lengthy career than you do, and you're in the early days of a startup, knowing that you may actually have a lot to give that person and a lot of really interesting insights from where you're at that they might benefit from, and just having that mindset from the outset is a really important thing to have. If you change that mentality, then you feel more confident to go out to people and open up yourself to those experiences.
I think it's your sort of a little bit your generation, to be honest with you. In my generation, it was around the other way. You generally speaking networking to get something from somebody that was and they would never consider you as having something that you give back to them, other than, to be frank with you, youthfulness. So I remember many years ago, one of the things that and I've kept this on in my life is that the senior partners of firms that I worked for back in those days, they liked my energy, my intellectual energy. I'm talking about, not physical energy, but for me it was all about career building. That's all they gave a shit about. It was like, how can I leg up from this particular individual? And who does this individual know? Who are the clients of the firm? And then how can I go and learn what those clients are doing and get some experience from those clients for myself? And that was that generation. I think your generation is a lot more generous, or maybe much more aware and have a better understanding of networking. And which is why I was just interested to hear what you had to say about that. Because for me, it's your very first education of these things, in your case, sort of to some extent my case too, is when you're at university. They are great nurseries of learning how to do, you're forced to learn how to network. How important is this efficiency point that you made before, when you said you went to university, you worked out the system, how to get through this with the least amount of effort, but get the right outcome?
What I think the biggest way that we learned, and this is just kind of general advice rather than anything specific in business, is that people get caught up doing work, and just being busy for the sake of busy is completely useless. Like there's no point fundamentally doing 18-hour days if it's not moving the ball forward. So I really think that ruthless prioritization is the key, and that creates urgency, and understanding what is just busy work versus what is actual work. And that kind of comes down to, you start with the end state in mind, and then you work backwards from there, and then identify the tasks that need to be done in order to achieve that goal. So if it's finishing university as fast as possible, well, what's the strategy? And then what tasks that can be broken down into like daily actions to lead up that way. So rather than starting with what do I need to do today, it's like, where do I need to end up? And then how do I work backwards from there? And I think the reality is that these frameworks exist and people can just copy them. Like, there's no point trying to invent your own system or do it. There's things like Getting Things Done. There's tons of great literature out there about how to be really efficient with your work, because ultimately there's no point working long hours. And I think the worship of hustle culture is not the right one to do. There's no point working long hours for the sake of working out long hours. It's like, how do you build a valuable life? And it's like, you will end up working long hours, but working out what is important, going backwards from there, and then structuring your life and your work around that will ultimately lead to better results.
So because you're right, the boast of how many hours people work is all bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, really what you want to know is how many efficient hours have you worked?
Yeah, what have you achieved in those hours?
Yeah, like
exactly.
if you do, I mean, that whole Malcolm Gladwell story about 10,000 purposeful hours, you don't become an expert in anything until you've done 10,000 hours. And it goes right back to the psychologists that did the original assessment of a Berlin School of Music back in, I think, the 1890s, something like that, where they looked at the proteges in this particular Berlin school. And irrespective of the fact that these individuals are proteges and they had them, all the talent in the world, the ones that ended up getting into the symphony orchestras, etc., as a violinist, in other words, as an A-grade violinist, as opposed to becoming a teacher after the number of years you spent at the school, were the ones who spent 10,000 hours. But the interesting thing about that, everybody was taking that away, oh, wow, I just got to spend time. It's called purposeful work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's 10,000 hours of purposeful practice.
Yeah.
So I learned music at school, and I'd play the piano until year 12. And for me, piano, and I had no idea, but piano in those days for me was just, I've got to do my hour practice every day. And I'd sit, it was like merry-go-round music, the way I played it, blah, 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 and I learned it off by heart. But there's no fucking value in it whatsoever. Like, at the end of the day, it was just wasting my time, to be frank. It was good enough to get through the subject, and I did okay. But the point was, I didn't really get anything out of it. Everyone's got to remember, and underline that word purposeful, which is what you just said.
Yeah.
Efficiency is about being purposeful in every minute you spend
Exactly.
in what you do. And if you can get it down from 18 hours to 9 hours, that's pretty good. But then you've got another 9 hours to do something with that 9 hours. Purposeful.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, would you agree with?
Totally agree. And then
Josh's
being
view?
reflexive as well, I think is really important. Like actually assessing.
Reflective, did you say?
Yeah, reflective on the work and assessing the work and actually, testing it out and changing tact based on that too. Because you can be being efficient, but the work may be leading you in the wrong direction and you might not be, actually assessing that
Who
work.
pulls who up?
I think, Ellie definitely pulls me up. But I think Ellie, actually that point is probably the one of the most important ones. And I think that's something that I've really learned from Ellie, which is yes, you got to be efficient. But if you're not constantly sense checking what you're doing, you could be really efficiently going down the wrong path or pursuing something. Or I was talking to someone about the sunk cost fallacy, about I put so much work into this, now I've got to keep going. It's actually knowing when to cut it and go, this is not working, we got to shift. And to your point, it's you have to be reflexive in what you do to be is this, am what I'm doing tactically or strategically furthering me to the goals? And is the data coming back and showing that? And if not, then you got to change, because just doing the same thing over and over again when it's not generating results is not
Would you be doing this if you didn't have Ellie involved in the business with you?
It'd be a disaster and everything would fall over.
Okay. So I often say, well, you, why are you saying that? No, I'm just joking. I often say that, in my various businesses I do, I cut, my brother sews.
Yeah.
I've never done a deal in 25 years that my brother hasn't done the follow through, because, I make a mess on the way through, but I make a pretty good mess. I cut it up nice. But my brother comes through and he stitches it up.
Yeah.
I can't operate otherwise. I'm like him a little bit, I'm bouncing off the walls. I'm up, down. I've got 30 deals on the go at once. But my brother will just come through very ruthlessly but very like a surgeon. He just does it and does it and does it and doesn't give up and doesn't let up in one point. He's I hate the word anal, but he is sort of like that. He's sort of crazy. But I couldn't operate without him.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I would not be anywhere near as so-called successful if he hadn't been there following through all the way through. I can't operate that way. So for me, being in partnership is really important.
Definitely. You need that counterbalance.
It's really important. I just need, because I know what I'm good at, but I know what I'm shit ass at.
One of the biggest lessons that I learned very early on is that people make a mistake in their career and what they try to learn on by optimizing to fix up their weaknesses, which is really bad, because if you've got a fixed allocation of time, which is there's 24 hours in a day, and you're going to improve something, if you keep improving on your weaknesses, you're only ever going to get to probably average. Whereas if you keep doubling down on your strengths, you can have an outsized skill in that. And the important thing is to go work out what you're not good at, and then find partners who are great at it, and then work with them together, and then 1 + 1 = 3 in that scenario. So you can have a partnership where the skills are so different and so complementary, and realizing that nothing is done on your own is really important. Go, I'm going to work on what I'm really good at, and understand that I'm not going to be good at those things, and that's okay, because you have different strengths and weaknesses. And that's why Ellie and I work so well together, because we are completely different in terms of working styles, communication styles, management styles, but the combination works really well together. And actually a really bad partnership is when there's two of the same people there, because all you're doing is you're over-indexing on something. You need people who have different skill sets. And that's not to say Ellie could probably do a better job at some of the things that I do, but dividing it up and saying okay, we're going to be clear about who does what, understand that you have these weaknesses, and then asking for help on things that you're not good at is super important as well.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you speak, and I was listening to Alex's language, and I have been listening to Josh's language, and I've been listening to it for the last, say, 20, 30 minutes, and his language to me, in terms of if I was looking at language to indicate how a person thinks, is very mathematical, beyond logic, but more mathematical. So it's looking at everything, because efficiency is about mathematics and being mathematical at something, And, his process is very mathematical. Don't waste time on things. Out of every hour, I want to get an hour and a half. You're I'm trying to leverage. Leverage is mathematical. Are you a thinker like that? Do you think like that, or do you think the other way?
I'd say I think the other way. Yeah. I'm definitely more, I'd say I'm more analytical. I'm more concerned with making sure that, I think you put it really nicely with the relationship that you have with your brother, where Josh will create these opportunities and then I will come and actually make those opportunities happen in practice with, putting them into place and getting everyone's buy-in, managing the team to do that, project managing the work through. And then I also am probably a little bit more I would say I'm more emotionally in tune.
Empathetic.
Empathetic than Josh is, which I think, from a management perspective, that works really well, because I think you need someone also to then sit there and pull people together, get people, influence people to do things in the company, and then understand what makes people tick and what motivates people. And that's kind of where my strengths lie, I think, at ChefPrep.
I think that's one thing that, that point of empathy is really key, because I think, people make this mistake often where they think you're the boss, you say something, it happens, or you don't have a certain title in an organization, you're more junior and you can't make things happen. That's just all not true. Even if you're the boss, Ellie and I both CEOs of the business, so we have the same title and rank. You can't actually make anything happen by saying, go do this. That never works. You have to get people to want to do things. And Ellie's ability to get people on board, to buy in, understand their needs, and get them to do what you want by aligning it to what they want is really key, because you can never make anyone do anything. It's, and that's one of the most important things to do, is go how do I have that empathy, understand people, communicate in their language, and Ellie is fantastic at that.
So it sounds like a perfect structure for us to go into the second half, go to the break now. We're going to talk about ChefPrep. What is it? What it does? I want to understand the mathematics of the thing. In other words, the logic around it, the market size logic, and how you are adapting the business to make sure you meet the market logic. So we'll go to the break and we'll come straight back. Well, we're back here with Elle and Josh Abulafia from ChefPrep. It's sort of like a new business in some respects as a startup. Who's going to tell me, what does ChefPrep do?
I'll kick off with what ChefPrep does. So ChefPrep is an online marketplace for restaurants to produce ready-made meals that we then consolidate and deliver to customers across New South Wales at the moment. So effectively, it's a two-sided marketplace, and it came out of our frustrations with the current food delivery platform. So when I was working as an entertainment lawyer, I was a partner at the law firm. I was working crazy long hours. I was finding it really hard to manage my weekly meals. So I was going through a process of meal prepping on the weekends for the following week and cooking the same meals.
Total punish.
Total nightmare. And I don't like cooking that much. I love food. I love eating out. I love restaurants. I love hospitality. But I hate cooking.
It's a total punish.
Absolutely hate it. And so I did that for a few months, and I was, you'd end up eating into your whole weekend just doing your meal
that's
prepping.
What I mean.
And then we found, so we obviously...
Plus sorry to interrupt, but when you make then on Thursday night when you go, oh shit, I don't really feel like that.
Exactly. You get to the Friday meal and it's looking a little bit sad, and you've had it 5 days in a row, and you're just it just feels like Groundhog Day. Yeah. So got really frustrated with that process, and we obviously tried out, all the meal delivery platforms, and they've all got their pros and their cons. So obviously, with, kind of stock standard food delivery platforms like Uber Eats and DoorDash, that's, great for convenience. But at the same time, it's, you can only order from one restaurant.
And you can't plan with them either, can you?
You can't plan with it.
It's sort of a transactional thing. Oh, that's what we feel like tonight.
Yeah. Exactly. You've got to eat it within a 24-hour period. It's not really good for weekly meal planning. We tried the ready-made, the meal kits, and I found that was even more frustrating than cooking myself.
You mean like Light and Easy and all that stuff?
Yeah, like HelloFresh and things like that. Yeah. And, I found that didn't really work for us because I'm cooking someone else's recipe. You've still got all the waste. You're spending a lot of time on that. And then we obviously tried also the ready-made meal providers, so like your My Muscle Chef and things like that. And from our perspective, because they're mass manufactured, we didn't think that the quality was quite there for what we were looking for.
After a while, you can get a bit bored with it too.
Exactly. Because you've got the same flavors to play around with. So we thought, I was kind of I came up with the idea, and I think subconsciously I'd noticed that restaurants had started playing around with producing ready-made meals during the first lockdown, and they were selling them out of their premises. And I thought, well, why not build a platform where we can actually give them the ability to reach new customers and to sell to a much broader market? And then we can also give customers a great deal of variety because they can order from all different restaurants at the same time. So that's kind of where ChefPrep, the concept, came from. And we came up with the idea January last year.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, just out of interest, how do you raise this? I mean, do you remember the moment you raised it? Did you say to Josh, my God, I got this great idea?
Yeah.
Literally?
I did.
What about this?
She came down in her shower cap from the shower.
I've got this great idea.
I always came up with crazy ideas, and he would always...
But is that because you were always talking to each other about the drama associated with having to get the meals prepared and delivered to you, whatever it is?
Yeah.
And then one day you just come down and you said,
wait a second,
unbelievable
this could
idea.
work. Yeah, that was exactly it. And for the first time, I've had a couple of batshit crazy ideas previously, and Josh has just poo-pooed them completely. And this one, like, when I saw his face, I was like, oh shit, this has actually got legs, because he was interested in it. So we started to, tease it out and explore it, and that's...
But how do you approach it? That's interesting because, I mean, you were running other businesses and you've done quite a few startups, etc. And you would have been working at a law firm in those days.
That's correct, yeah.
You say, oh my God, I've got to give her the time of day because I don't want her to feel like I'm, like just dishing the idea. Or are you genuinely interested on every occasion?
Well, I think Ellie and I have a weird relationship where we talk a lot about business, like just generally and prior. Like, I had a weird fascination with the economics of the media industry before. And that's one thing that we bonded over, and still, weirdly enough, it's something that is entertaining. So with Ellie, when we come with ideas, it's never really like a shutdown on just like, no, that's not going to work. It's like analytical discussion about like, here's why I think this wouldn't work, like this, and this reason. Like, I think this would be challenging for that reason. That's why I don't think it would work. And then we kind of go through that as well. With this one, it was like a lot of the earlier boxes got ticked. But I think... in the sense of poo-pooing ideas, like, I think one thing to understand is that it's going to be a million times harder than you think, but you kind of need to be irrationally optimistic to even get going. And I think that we took now 2 rounds of investment from venture capital, and those businesses are ones that have what's called a power law. So they need to return a certain amount, and the whole premise of that power law and the way that it returns means that the ideas are going to sound crazy and they're going to be extremely difficult. So just because someone says no or says it's not going to work doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue it. You've got to understand why they're saying no, taking that feedback into your mental model and adjusting it and going, oh, can it work or can't it work? But you got to realize that you're trying something crazy, trying something to really disruptive. And that means that a lot of people are going to say no. So just because people say no or don't agree with you, take on their feedback and listen to it and account for it, but don't just not pursue it. Because
on ChefPrep though, when you and Ellie were talking about this, what were the non-negotiables? So what are the things you say? Well, hang on, it's got to have this. It's got to be a marketplace, for example, or how do you work out what the non-negotiables are? Yeah, and tick those boxes.
So I think if you look at it, and we can talk about where we want to take the business, but I think the way that we looked at it really simply is that you got to, when people come to me with business ideas and they say, oh, I want to raise money, I want to do this. They often start with the idea, I've got to raise money, but they don't think about the other person on the other side of the table, like, and how does it work and what are their thoughts? And really what we start off with is that as a baseline, we want to take ChefPrep internationally, but assuming we can only do it in Australia, you've got a customer base of 25 million people, right? So that is your whole market of people that are currently there. And then you got to understand like the dynamic of the product. So if you've got a product that you can only sell people once, a good example of this is the Casper mattresses in the US who are having some trouble. Like, there's only so many people that can buy a mattress, and you're only going to buy that mattress once. So understanding how big is the potential realm of people that can buy your product, how often is that transaction with them? I know you do mortgages, so every month you get a payment from the customer, and there's a large amount of customers, so that business actually makes sense. So those two things are kind of like at the core is like, is the market big enough? So what's your model with that? And then understanding of those 25 million people, how many do you actually need to actually make this work? So we kind of did on the back of the envelope, to achieve the outcome, we need 0.1% of Australia buying meals a week to get an exit outcome that we wanted. And that was such an achievable goal that was like, okay, do you think 0.1% of people will buy ready-made meals or these types of products? The answer is probably yes, which means, okay, well, we got something viable here. We now have a market that's big enough, a model that's big enough. Now, how for the cheapest price can we test those assumptions? And that's what we did. We literally put up a landing page that cost us $2,500. We bought some Facebook ads and we approached a bunch of restaurants and we validated the restaurants wanted to do it and the customers wanted to do it. And that whole exercise cost us probably $5,000, $10,000 to validate everything. And that way we could then go out to people and be like, here's a valuable idea, here's viable. We ticked all the boxes of, we've got the market's big enough, there's repeat transactions so that we can generate an ongoing revenue stream. And we've already shown that customers want it and partners want it. Now we're going to go out and do this. So it's like kind of going through that model.
And then once you've done that, the modeling, and you've tested it out there and you found out there were people who want to take it up, what was your next big step? You've got to build a system, you've got to build an IT, you've got to build a back end, IT back end, you've got to be able to, do you do the transactions yourself or the transactions are done with the restaurateur?
We use a third party. It's
on your site though.
Yeah. We control the marketplace. I think so. It was really like scoping out the work after that point in time and then building a team. We knew that we had to build a team very quickly to make this actually happen and make it tangible, make it real, because me and Josh working on the business together, like we have a finite capacity and we obviously don't have the expertise in certain areas like engineering and operations and product and things like that. So we knew that we needed to attract the right people. So for us, key was really doubling down on, pretty much understanding what our vision was and going out and selling that vision to people that we wanted to hire.
And you said engineering.
Engineering,
you mean in terms of software?
Yeah. Software, yeah.
So software engineers, someone who can build the back end.
Yeah.
Because that's the most important part of it. Is this app-based, by the way?
No,
it's web-based. It's web-based,
yeah.
okay. So you got to get someone who can build all the infrastructure that sits behind it.
Exactly.
Out of interest, how do you find these individuals? I mean, do you go to LinkedIn it's a recruitment game, but it's not an easy one to do because, you go and find, like third year computer engineering or computer science students when you don't have a lot of money at the beginning to throw at it.
So, I think the point about not having a lot of money to throw around at the beginning, I think is really important to, before you start understanding what type of business you want, because ultimately you're in business, you got to make money. So there's two ways you can make money in business. One is selling something, or one is generating dividends to pay you. And when you are looking at a dividend generating business, oftentimes you won't necessarily go focus on raising and growing really quickly because you got to have profitable, sustainable cash flows. So our model was we want to go really, really large and then exit through an IPO or an exit, which meant that the way we could fund the business and how we could go hire people was then dictated by that strategy. So establishing that first to be like, okay, we're going to need a certain amount of capital. This is how we're going to structure the capital, structure all the shares and everything like that to allow us to do it. That was really important. So we could then actually go hire really high quality people and pay them market rates as well.
That was a big key for us for attracting talent.
So you didn't go hunting down students who want to get $40 an hour, who are probably competent, but not that competent, not experienced.
Every founder that I've met said that when you under index on staff and go for the cheaper option, it ends up costing twice as much because you either lose the time or you end up having to get rid of them and hire someone more senior to come in and do it anyway.
Also debilitating and frustrating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you go, oh shit, this is never going to work.
And you need to, like in the early days, you need to get the foundations right. And getting the foundations right usually, requires people who have got a bit of experience setting up like their area of expertise within a business.
How do you find these people then, Ellie? Like when Google and Amazon, everyone is sucking the oxygen out of the system. How do you find these dudes and girls?
Well, we were a bit bit cheeky. We reached out to people, a lot of people early on via LinkedIn. So we had an idea in mind of who we wanted for particular like heads of departments or chief technology officer roles and things like that.
So you're trying sorry, I'm going to interrupt it because it's important to me. Did you say you go to find the chief of whatever?
Yeah.
And get that individual then to fill in below themselves? Do you go to the top first? In other words, the manager of that particular area of the business?
Yeah. We started, our hiring was much more senior roles to start with. So instead of going at the junior or the mid-level, we went for much more experienced people at the outset because we wanted them to set up their own departments, especially in areas where we didn't feel comfortable, assessing candidates for those roles. So I think engineering is a perfect example of that. Like we both don't come from an engineering background. So us setting up an engineering team with, junior engineers is probably going to be a recipe for disaster for us. So we wanted to make sure that we were hiring the right people. And we sort of went out and specifically looked at comparable companies and looked at the skill sets that we needed and went out and approached people individually. And we were just lucky that we could sell people on the dream and get them on board. And we ended up attracting a group of like amazing talent, in such a short period of time. So,
and I think that word Ellie uses is really important, is selling. Like ultimately, if you want to start a business and you say, I don't want to do sales, it's like, well, you probably shouldn't start a business because you're selling to the entire time you're doing a business, you're selling. When you raise money, people aren't giving you money. You're selling equity. You're selling a share of your business. So you're selling then when you find partners, like in our case, it's restaurants or distributors, we're selling to them, and staff, when you're recruiting, you're selling to them. Over time, just with any business, like selling gets easier. Like
once you've got a reputation and you've got publications putting you out there, you're known for X, Y, and Z, and you've got consistent revenue flows. Like it makes it a lot easier to attract talent. But in the early days, you're really selling people on a dream. You're coming in and
do
saying,
you do that personally?
Yeah. All the hires thus far have been us recruiting people,
or referred from other staff members, but most of it's come from cold approaches to people that we think are fantastic, meeting them, going through a process to interview them, and then bring them on board. But I think one thing to Eddie's point is like selling them a dream, but I think selling the dream is not selling them a fantasy as well. Like I think companies like Canva, Afterpay, Zip, like all fantastic businesses, but there's a term that's applied to them that I don't think is relevant anymore, which is a startup. And a startup is a group of people bringing something to the world. They've done that already, and now they're hugely successful, huge businesses, and they employ probably thousands of people, right? So people who were really like building things are different to people who like managing things. And those companies are now mature where they've got product market fit, they're in market, and it's a different set of challenges that they're going through. And people who like the earlier challenges, that's still what they like working on. So oftentimes you can find amazing talent because they're like, actually, my skills can be applied to a different subset of problems rather than I don't want to be one of 1,000 working on this tiny subset. Like there's a guy at Google who his job is just to make that button work 1,000 times faster, and like that is his job. Just like that button is just his job, right? It's very different to working on something holistically and bigger, and people get joy out of that. So selling them on the dream of like, hey, we're actually going to build something together. You're going to be part of it. You're not going to just be one of 1,000. You can make decisions here. Like you can influence the shape and direction of the company. People respond well to that. So understanding where you are and how to attract them into your world is super important. And the dream is not necessarily like the dream of, we're going to make you $100 million and you're going to be this super rich person. It's like a dream of like, what do I want to wake up every day and work on? That's the dream we're selling them, not the dream of the exit opportunity.
And how important is equity?
Super important because the
staff equity I'm talking about now.
No. It's one of the most important things ever, because let's say we just completed a raise. We've just raised another $3 million. If no one besides us had equity in the company, the incentives would be for the staff and for everybody to try maximize that amount of resource that's allocated to them, because the more resources, maybe take a higher salary or, spend more money on their department or be a bit wasteful with the money. But as soon as you go, you're an owner in this business And every dollar that we spend is also a dollar that you're spending, that you own. And if you spend it inefficiently, or you try to do something that's not for the betterment of the business, but betterment of yourself, now the equity completely aligns it, because everyone here, his job is to get the share price from A to B. And that's being efficient with money, efficient with time, efficient with whatever. But because they have ownership in the business, it's not just like they feel like they've built something, but they have an actual holding in the company. And if it's successful, there's any success in the future is going to be far outweighed by trying to get a bit more now.
It's a great point. I think it is. It's about alignment and then that ownership mentality, because I think when people feel like they own a part of the business, there's a different mentality attached to that across the board. And then I think ESOP is really important for the whole ecosystem in general.
ESOP not being the Greek mythology, but
the employee share options.
Employee share option scheme.
Sorry.
And Josh has told me about. I mean, you don't need to mention the law firm, but you guys have quite a simple ESOP, but it's quite efficient as well.
Yeah,
it's 10% of your salary or something along those lines. Is it?
Yeah, I think to the right at the start of the conversation, we talk about attitude, right? And coming from an attitude of abundance, right? I think people often with equity think about things in terms of percentages, like what percentage of the company do I own? And that is toxic, not because you don't want to have people understand what percentage of the company they own, but people just can't wrap their head around the fact that when you raise money, you dilute. So your ownership will go down. So people every time go like, oh, we just raised another round of financing now. I own less of I own less of the company now. What's going on? And what we say to them, it's like, well, if you look at it, actually the size of the pie has grown.
So you got more value.
Exactly.
Less numbers.
Valued on your per option basis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the reason why we do it that way is so people understand it's like, okay, you get this dollar value in equity. And then at the last round, it was valued at this. So say it was valued at $10 million, right? So you had $100,000 worth of options at $10 million. When we go raise at $100 million now, it's worth $1 million. So they don't feel like their percentage has gone down, but their value's gone up.
Yeah, so we made 900,000.
Exactly.
Example.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I think it's incumbent on founders to understand those employee equity schemes and to actually explain that to their staff, because there's a lot of misunderstandings in the industry around how they actually operate and how they work and what the entitlements actually mean and how it's structured. So I think that's one benefit of having a legal background, is being able to understand those sort of complex regimes and then to actually explain that to staff in
a simple terms,
in a way that they can digest.
I don't want to sort of
but
I'm not trying to undermine anyone's thinking, but it's got to be simplified.
Exactly, so we're in the process of actually trying to create some resources around that, not only for our staff but for the broader industry that you can use, so that it can be a little bit clearer and better understood by people, because there's a lot of different ways of doing it. And I think that there is a lot of murkiness around how it actually operates in practice, because we are generally speaking, the whole startup industry is not super advanced in Australia, and you don't have a whole bunch of exits where options are coming into play a lot of the time. So I think it's a really important thing for the industry to understand how it works.
In other words, how can I convince someone that this is valuable?
Yeah, exactly.
There's value in this. I mean, someone being your employee or the staff member, this is valuable.
Yeah.
And this is why it's valuable. But this is what you got to do to make it valuable too, by the way. Everyone's got a part to play.
That's it.
We're running out of time. So I want to ask you this. We are here to talk about ChefPrep. And I've been sort of really curious to find out the way you guys think. But tell me where ChefPrep is at today. You've just done a raising. You've finished a raise this week, last week, week before Christmas.
Yeah, we signed all the term sheets on Christmas. Well, we did the first half just before, and then on Christmas Eve we signed all the term sheets for everything. So we raised $1.25 million in May of last year, and then just closed another $3 million at the end, so about $4.25 million in total so far.
And you got some good heads on there?
Yeah, we've got some really good, obviously you're an investor. We've got Artesian, who's one of the larger funds in Australia, GFC, who's one of the larger global funds, who were early in like
unfortunate
Slack and
name,
Facebook.
but yes.
Yeah, that's what everyone
said
says. But yeah, so some really good backers there. Then we've got some great angel investors.
Yeah, some really great industry knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. Someone who's formerly very high up at Airtasker and a founder who sold the equivalent of Uber Eats in the UK for a few £100 million. He's also an early investor. But I think we're just really stoked where we're at now. So shortly we'll be able to announce make a big announcement about Melbourne and expanding down there and becoming national. Right now there's 12 of us in the team full time. Someone just accepted another offer, but by the middle of this year, we want to be about 35 staff full time. So we're actively hiring and scaling, and we've kind of hit that inflection point now where it's just like go, scale, and hit that next level of milestones we need to unlock the next tranche of capital.
So in terms of restaurants, like whatever the vendors are, you call them restaurants, I guess, restaurants, cafes to some extent.
Yeah.
So how many vendors would you have signed up now?
I think 30 or so.
Yeah, we've got about 30. So we've got around 22 live on ChefPrep, and it's probably over 100 different meals to choose from. And then we've got another 10 to 15 vendors being onboarded, but we're now starting to expand out our product category. So we're getting dry goods. So our focus is on long shelf life goods.
Which means what? Frozen food. Frozen
yeah.
Pre-prepared meals, if that's the word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the meals are frozen, which I think there's some negative connotations with, but our restaurants, we've worked really closely with them to actually design the meals so that they are amazing when you unfreeze them. But the benefit of having the frozen model is that we store all the meals on behalf of our restaurant. We store them, so we can then consolidate them for customer orders, which means that you're not limited to ordering from one restaurant or one vendor at a particular time.
So it gives me more choice as a consumer.
Exactly.
Theoretically, you could order 22 different restaurants in one order.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. And then also the restaurants benefit from a marketplace model where they're, in the same box and delivery box with other restaurant partners, and they can benefit from like brand halos and
so
all the rest of that.
I will go onto ChefPrep's website, and what do I have to do if I'm a customer? Do I have to register? Give you my details?
No, just go through and check out. But add meals to the cart.
Add whatever you want into your cart, and then we're delivering 3 times a week at the moment, but we're moving towards next day delivery. So it's effectively as easy as whatever's in stock, whatever you like the look of, you put it into your cart. We package it up for you, and then we deliver it out.
Feedback? Do you seek feedback from?
Yep, or feedback from or any customer send us feedback. We ask them to rate the meals, so we constantly improve them. But that's where kind of like some of the ideas for the dry goods came from, because now so we'll be going live, I think it's next week, with
dry goods means what?
So like mueslis, chili oils,
cocktails type stuff.
Yeah, things that you can keep in the pantry. So you want to wake up, have we're with a great macadamia milk company, adding coffee. So anything that you can fit in your pantry as well, from great restaurants and cafes, doing jerky now, tons of different condiments and stuff that you can just go, I just want to have goods made from the best restaurants and fantastic producers, and you just select them, and we consolidate in one order and send it out to you, and we'll be doing cool cocktails soon and stuff like that as well.
So apart from this ultimately, being something that gets done overseas, like you roll it out internationally, what in terms of your product lines and your expansion, where do you see it in, say, 2 years from now? I'm sure your investors ask you this sort of question.
Yeah, I think maybe in the nearer term, in 6 months, we'll probably have, based on the current run rate and a few things that are in the works, about 200 different brands on the platform in 6 months. Of that, there'll be probably 20 different categories of products, from daily items, pantry items, cocktails, drinks, health meals, just basically almost like anything you can buy in a supermarket, but made by restaurants. Yeah. Is where we're kind of going
your
down
premium,
towards.
the home for food experience.
Are issues such as waste and or plastics and those things, things that you are using as sort of giving a bit of an edge?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a big part of actually moving towards the frozen model was the food wastage issue. So people can store the meals for between 1 and 3 months in their freezer, which gives them flexibility to eat it and obviously reduces food wastage. And then we facilitate partners with packaging if they don't already have their own packaging, and the packaging's all biodegradable, home compostable, it's microwave safe, freezer safe, and oven safe. So
because that's one of my objections to some of these meals that you talked about before, where you can go and buy them at the big department stores. Is the amount of plastic, etc.
There's so much waste associated.
And I'm a different generation, but a lot of people you're selling to, your cohort, very conscious of this sort of stuff. Really,
So all our packaging now is recyclable. So we're moving to even more recyclable packaging. I think is it next week?
Relatively.
Yeah. So instead of using thermal liners made out of recyclable plastic, we'll be moving to wool, using a different form of ice that actually it's a type of dry ice that evaporates, which means that there's no waste with it. There's no plastic or anything. New containers that are also insulated but made out of recycled cardboard. So all that stuff is we've been very conscious of, and we even are looking at how to offset some of the carbon from any deliveries as well. I think that nowadays, it's almost like having a website was 20 years ago, where it was like some people had to do it, but now everyone has to have a website. Doesn't matter if you're a personal trainer or whatever. I think now the climate responsibility is going to be, every business has to think about it, because people just won't buy your products if they're generating tons of waste. And I think that will come for every industry, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. It just has to be part of it. So.
And it is about sort of carbon footprint too, but it's one that someone's going to have to deal with over time. But the last mile, like your fulfillment.
Yeah, last mile, we outsource that to a partner. Yeah.
You have a partner?
We have a partner that we work with that is fantastic. Cold chain maintained the whole way through. Fantastic tracking of delivery, fantastic standards. And yeah, we've been really lucky to partner up with them, because they don't really tend to work with a lot of other startup businesses. So we were fortunate in that regard. But yeah, it's one of those things, last mile, that it's a huge endeavor to take on yourself. So we find
especially with cold foods. I mean, you've got to keep it in a thermally managed.
That's it. It's a business in and of itself. But I think we're also like exploring options, as Josh mentioned, around dry ice and things like that, that would actually open up other means of delivery transport, where you might not necessarily need the refrigerated or frozen vans to be delivering the products. So we've got a lot of like space to play around in that, but we usually let the experts do their thing.
It's a very interesting model. I mean, as I said earlier, I've invested in it, but it's a very interesting model. I think, it's a shit thing to say, but COVID's helped it.
Yeah.
It really has. A lot of people I talk to, especially people in my age group, don't want to sit inside in a restaurant anymore. They don't want to sit inside. Happy if they can be outside, but you can't do it in the winter for a start. But also outside usually is limited, because our regulations that are in this country, at least in this city, don't allow you to sit outside very much. There's, because, if it's a footpath and there's safety issues and all that other bullshit everyone goes on about. So you can't really find somewhere to go. But we still don't, I don't want to be eating the stuff out of, some of the big department stores where that frozen meals, because, I feel like I'm getting, I'm dudded, like it's not cheap, it's not expensive, but it's sort of boring. But I'd love to be able to get stuff from some good restaurants, but I don't know where the hell to get. I don't want to go there to get it. And plus, I can't be stuffed getting up and driving there to pick it up as a takeaway either.
Yeah.
That's pretty annoying, to be honest with you.
I think also our model as well, with the way that we do it, we are agnostic about where you are for where the restaurant is, because we consolidate it. So we can ship out, to Central Coast, for example, from a restaurant in Surrey Hills. It doesn't matter. You can't do that on Uber Eats. But I think, just taking a sample of N of one with ChefPrep, our staff don't want to come back in the office. And I think we've now gone through a generational shift where people, they want maybe an office to go into 1 or 2 days a week, but people don't want to be in the office 9 to 5 anymore. And actually, people want to probably move into more suburbs, where you can have a bigger house or live a bit further away from the city, be closer to a beach or, a nicer area, not be crammed in an apartment, which now means that, all the density and benefits of that, I can pop downstairs and go to the restaurant. Well, if you're living in the suburbs, you don't have that and you're working from home, you just need food in the fridge. It's like, well, these are new ways of working, and restaurants now, and what they're saying to us is like, this is the new reality. Like, people come to us for entertainment, but like the we need new ways to generate revenue streams, and this is one of them, where you can actually make money by having a different view of the customer and serving different customers and doing it in different ways. And it's an evolution that's happened of COVID where people are changing the way they work and where they live even. So I think it's tied into that.
That's a really good point. And I think it also is a huge benefit to our restaurant partners because it's not cannibalizing their existing customer base.
Yeah.
So if you look at, things like Uber Eats and other delivery platforms where you've got that, 5-kilometer radius for delivery, a lot of those people that are being serviced by those platforms are existing, customers of that restaurant who would sometimes, who would, come in, dine in for, those experiences. Whereas we're giving those restaurants access to customers. That,
I'm an example of that. By the way. Where I live,
yeah,
it's a lot of them don't deliver to.
Yeah.
It's just that too far out in these suburbs. I'm a little far out on these, like about as far out on these suburbs as you can get.
Yeah.
And a lot of them say, sorry, we don't deliver out there.
Yeah.
And which means I'm sort of limited to what I can order on in terms of takeaway, which means, and I'm actually, I love the idea. And I haven't yet tried it yet, but I'm going to try it. I'd say to everybody, like for me, give ChefPrep a crack. Just like ChefPrep's giving it a crack. You guys give it a crack. Give it a crack. It's not about saying it, actually. Give us a crack. And it could be your strap line going forward.
Give us a crack.
Yeah. Give us a crack. So good at that.
Anyway, I want to thank you both very much for your time.
You.
I appreciate the intellect you've been putting into this. And don't forget, tell Alex, your dad, that I'll call him straight back.
I will.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Elle and Josh.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.